Hey, this is Mike with 4 and 6 Music. So what I want to do in today's lesson is I want to actually go over the beginning of an arrangement of I Could Write a Book, a very popular jazz standard. And what I want to really focus on with this is I want to focus on identifying chord patterns and certain trends that you're going to see with chord progressions from jazz song to jazz song when you go from standard to standard, arrangement to arrangement. So initially, what happens over here, and I highlighted the sections that I do want to focus on. Initially, we actually start off with a 1-6-2-5 chord pattern in the key of C. And we discussed this in another video, what 1-6-2-5 would be. But just as a review, when we're identifying these chord patterns, we're pretty much using the scale degree on which the chord is built on. So for the 1 chord, that's our 1st scale degree. For the 6th chord, that's our 6th scale degree. For the 2 chord, that's our 2nd scale degree. And then for the 5th chord, that's our 5th scale degree. And what I mean by that is based off of the major scale, when we'll base this off of the C major scale, since this is a 1-6-2-5 chord progression in the key of C, is when in C we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then back to C, which is going to be our octave, right? So we really have 7 scale degrees with which we're pulling from. So C would be our 1st, our A minor would be our 6th, our D minor will be our 2nd, and then our G will be our 5th. All right. If you want to tie this into solfege instead of scale degrees, such as the notes, you can think of it as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So you can think of it as that. So do would be our 1st scale degree, la would be our 6th, re would be our 2nd, and then sol would be our 5th. So how that sounds, and again, when we're playing in a big band setting, a lot of times I would say when you're playing rhythm guitar, approach it from the Freddie Green method, which would just be long, short with the rhythm playing. And you don't have to use full chords like that. You can even use just smaller versions of the chord like that as well. So you can negate some of the strings, some of the notes, and that'll be perfectly fine, so long as, again, as you keep that long, short strumming pattern. So for our 1-6-2-5, it's going to sound like this in the key of C. Alright, and like I said in another video, usually for the 5 chord, I know I use the bar chord for this. For the 5 chord, usually what I'm going to do is a smaller version, such as that. So just so you hear the difference, that would be what the difference is. So when you're taking away the notes, it's not going to sound as full, which is fine, because if you're playing in a big band setting, a lot of times you're going to have a piano player playing the chords, and you don't want to interfere with what they're doing. So I would say, especially when you're playing along with the piano player, not just in a big band setting, but in a small group setting as well, the less notes you play, the better, because you're not going to be in the way of what the piano is doing. So we have, again, our C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7, and then we repeat this, but then afterwards we go to A7 instead of A minor 7. So just so you hear the difference between that, and you'll see the difference too. So this is our 1-6-2-5. Our A, our 6 is a minor 7. And then over here, instead of having an A minor 7, we have an A7. And this is what we call a secondary dominant. And with the secondary dominant, usually when we are analyzing it, and when you analyze music, usually you're going to be using this Roman numerals for the chord numbers, rather than just the numbers that we're usually using in the the Latin alphabet, I guess. So over here we have 1, 6, 2, 5 that I analyzed. That's what it's going to look like. And then over here we have the same thing with the secondary dominant, but rather than writing a 6, 7, like a 6 with a 7 next to it, we have a 5, 7 over 2, because that 5 chord, that dominant 7 chord, is the dominant 7 of our D. Because if we count up 5 from D, 5 scale degrees from D, we have D, E, F sharp, because that would be the key of D major, G, A, right? So that's going to be the 5th scale degree of D. So when you analyze it, you would not write 6, 7, you would write 5, 7 of 2, or 5, 7 over 2, because that's the secondary dominant that is supposed to be going to the 2nd scale degree, right? It's not the secondary dominant of our 1st scale degree, because we already have that. That's right over here, our 5, 7. And I'm going to put a link to this sheet in the description box just so you guys have it, so you can have a look at it and work along with the video, right? So just so you hear the difference between it, because it does sound a little bit different, when we add that dominant 7 to the 6th scale degree, it really wants to push the music forward a lot more. The momentum is there a lot more, so that for the listener, they want that chord to be resolved to that next chord, right? So that's the whole point of a dominant 7 chord, is to urge the listener on to the next chord, to the resolution, because of the dissonance in that chord, right? So here is the both the chord progressions side by side. We have our 1, 6, 2, 5, and then afterwards the 1, 6, 2, 5 with our secondary dominant, our A7 rather than our A minor. So here we go, the original, and then the revised. So it sounds very similar. Again, the only difference is that 6th scale degree using the dominant 7 chord. After that, we have some more chords going by. And what I want to look at actually is what starts at measure 29 over here, right? 29, yep. So over here, we actually start off with our A minor. It says A minor 9. Again, when you're reading big band music, you're going to see a lot of chord extensions, because harmonically what's happening with the big band is you're going to have certain players who are taking care of those extensions in the chord. By extension, I mean for, let's say, a 7 chord, that's a 4-note chord. You're not going to have just those 4 notes happening in the band itself, within like the horn section, for example, because that's not going to create as much harmonic interest as adding the extensions, more notes. So the extensions would be like 9s, 11s, 13s, right? So whenever you see that, my suggestion, so if I see this A minor 9, for example, yes, I could play an A minor 9 if I wanted to, but I could just as easily play an A minor 7, and it would be perfectly fine. It would be applicable. Because again, the less notes you're playing, especially when there's a piano player who's also accompanying the band, the better, because you don't want to step on their toes. So over here we have our A minor 7, and then we go to a D minor 7 flat 5. Our minor 7 flat 5s are pretty interesting chords. We're going to have a look at the minor 7 flat 5 in the next measure after this, because I'm going to show you guys how this one works. So we have our, again, A minor, D minor 7 flat 5, A minor again, then our F sharp, F sharp minor 7 flat 5. So you could play it over here, same voicing as over here. You can also play the F sharp minor 7 flat 5 over there as well, right? Both would be different fingerings. You're starting, the root is going to be on the different note, so I'm sorry, on the different string. So over here, that minor 7 flat 5, that D minor 7 flat 5, the root is on the 5th string. Same thing with the F sharp minor 7 flat 5. And then our F sharp minor 7 flat 5 over here, the root is on the 6th string. So the root is placed in a different area for this. For the minor 7 flat 5, I would actually play the flat 5 for this, or I would just negate the 5. The reason why is because if you're playing, let's say, an F sharp minor chord, you have that 5, but then if you have the F sharp minor 7 flat 5 in the chord, that's going to clash with each other, both the flat 5 and then the 5 itself. So when we see that, should be that, yep. So when we see that flat 5 and the natural 5 together, let's say I play that, again, that F sharp minor 7 instead of F sharp minor 7 flat 5, you're going to hear this in the band. Well, at least as far as the guitar with another instrument that's playing the flat 5. So that's going to clash a bit. It's not going to sound as good unless you're going for like a Thelonious Monk thing. But if you're doing that, you're most likely going to play those minor seconds on your instrument, on the guitar, rather than having the minor seconds occur between different instruments. So my suggestion would be when you see a flat 5, play the flat 5 or just omit it rather than playing a natural 5. Anyway, so we see that F sharp minor 7 flat 5, and then afterwards it goes to a G minor 7, C7 to F major 7, B flat 7, E minor 7, A7, D minor 7, G7. Then we have this D flat major 9, sharp 11. For this, you could just play a major 7, that would be perfectly fine. And then afterwards we resolve down to our C major 7. And this is something that you will see in music, especially in jazz where you have a lot of harmony going on, is delaying the resolution. And what I mean by delaying the resolution is, let's say I have a 2-5-1 in the key of C. D minor 7, G7, C. When I go from G7 to C, I want to resolve that G7. So we have, if I delay the resolution, I'm going to use a different chord. And one type of chord that you will see is when you take either a major chord or a dominant 7 chord, and you play that up a half step from the resolved chord, whatever the one chord is. So this would be like a flat 2 major 7. I think they call this a Neapolitan chord when you're analyzing it in like the classical way. But this chord ultimately delays the resolution. So let me play the 2 progressions so you can hear that. So we have our 2-5-1. And then our 2-5-1 with the flat 2 added. So that, again, that flat 2, and that's a flat 2 major 7, it's not resolved yet. Now it's resolved from that 5 chord. So that helps to delay the resolution so that it holds off a little bit longer until getting to the end of that, that musical phrase. And that's pretty much what the point of that D flat major 7 is over there. And you can see how long we play that for until we resolve back to our C major 7. Going back to the F sharp minor 7, because I wanted to briefly go over that. So for the F sharp minor 7 over here, we're going from F sharp minor 7 up to our G minor, right? And usually when I see that, I think, okay, this must be imitating a dominant chord in some way, because our dominant chord of G would be D, right? So we could play D7 to our D7 to our G minor. chord. So again, if I play that, I'll play it over here. Sorry. Like that. And our F sharp minor 7 is pretty much just going to be replacing that D7 chord over there. So if we look at this, we see our A minor 7 initially going to a D minor 7 flat 5, then going back to an A minor. So that D minor 7 flat 5 is interesting over here because if you look, we do have some slash chords. So these slash chords, anytime you see this, it's basically the chord that you're playing on the left side and then the bass note on the right side. So the bass note over here is an A flat, which if you don't know what you're doing with that, just ignore that. Play the chord on the left side. Let the bassist take care of the bass note in the slash chord. If you want to play that, by all means, go ahead, especially if you're playing solo, something solo, or if you're the only accompanist, then I would suggest implementing that, because what happens with this is something pretty cool. We have our A minor, then we go down a half step with the A flat in the bass, then we go down a half step to a G, so it's A minor chord again, but with the G in the bass instead of an A. Then we go down to our F sharp minor 7 flat 5, and then we go back up to the G minor. And so that bass, when we hear that, is going to be so that bass line is working its way down in half steps, which is why over here, when we go from A minor to D minor 7 flat 5, it's a flat 5 because the bass is using that A flat, again, to go down a half step to that G with the A minor 7. And then after that, we go to F sharp. Oh, there we go. I was like, where's that note coming? So there's our F sharp minor 7 flat 5. And this chord is replacing the D7 chord, because if we look at this, here is our A7 and D minor 7 flat 5. You can see there are no notes that are similar between these two. So that D minor 7 flat 5 is not acting as a replacement for a dominant 7 chord. But over here, we see the D7. And then we see this F sharp minor 7 flat 5, and if we look at the spelling over here, we have a lot of similar notes. We have the F sharp, which is the same, the A, which is the same, the C, which is the same. So that F sharp minor 7 flat 5 is pretty much just going to be a D9 chord. Our E would be the 9th in our D dominant chord. So this is basically a D9 chord with an F sharp in the bass, right? So that's pretty much how that F sharp minor 7 flat 5 works in the progression, because when we go from a D7, our dominant chord, to our 1 chord, the 1 chord we want to go to is, yeah, you guessed it, G, which is the next chord after our F sharp minor 7 flat 5. So rather than going from D7 to G minor, we go from F sharp minor 7 flat 5 back up to G minor. So that's how that works, and that's how you would analyze that section over there. So this is just and this is only one section of this song. This song is about 3 pages long. But when you're reading jazz charts, my suggestion is get used to seeing patterns, because you're going to see a lot of the same patterns we went over today in other types of music, such as chord patterns 1-6-2-5, 2-5-1. We see plenty of those. Obviously, the D minor 7 to G7 is a 2-5-1, but we also see this G minor 7 to C7 to F major 7. So our G minor to C, that is also a 2-5-1. Sorry, a 2-5 as well. Well, with the F major 7 being the 1 chord. So we see the 2-5-1 over there. And if I were to analyze that, I would write down underneath 2, 5, and then for the 5 I usually put a 7 if it's a 7 chord, and then 1. So I would write it like that if I was analyzing it. And the analysis works when you're really trying to make sense of the music. But a lot of times when I'm playing jazz and I'm reading these charts, I'm not really thinking of it so much in that way in that moment, because I've done this so many times already that it's just almost becomes like second nature when I'm seeing these chord changes. But if I were to sit down and actually analyze it, that's pretty much how I would do that, as I would write the Roman numerals underneath. And, like I said, for doing it in for classical music, they do have certain words and certain phrases that they're going to use, such as the Neapolitan 6 chord, I think it's called. It's basically that flat 2 major 7 chord that we talked about that resolves down to our 1 chord. So when you're analyzing things within the jazz genre, it's going to be a little bit different compared to classical. So if you enjoyed those videos and would like private lessons with me, then you can fill out the booking form in the description box. I do offer in-home guitar and bass lessons for anyone in the Syracuse, Oneida, New York area, but I also offer online lessons for anybody else as well. So I hope that was useful. I will see you guys in the next video. Later.